Nicole thought she knew Fairmont Crest long enough to understand that everything there operated on appearances, on well-timed smiles and promises wrapped in expensive gifts. But only when she stood at the crossroads of Carlton and Cale did she realize the most terrifying thing wasn't the rumors, the scandals, but the feeling of being drawn into a story that could ruin her. She was living in a phase where everything seemed brilliant. The man beside her was Carlton, a man who both confused and thrilled her, always knowing how to touch her areas of confidence and her yearning for recognition, making her feel not just a woman who had gone through a failed marriage, but a woman who could be chosen, pursued, and desired. The closer she was to Carlton, the more Nicole felt re-illuminated, but it was the kind of light that made it difficult to distinguish between dawn and fire. Their relationship was passionate, intimate, even moments that made her forget the time, forget her reason, forget the vow she had made to herself that she would never become the kind of woman who scrutinizes a man. Yet it was precisely at that point, where intimacy seemed like proof of love, that Nicole hesitated instead of being certain. This hesitation wasn't the shyness of someone newly in love, but rather a warning system activated from deep within, as if each time she allowed herself to take another step, another part of her pulled the brakes, reminding her that passion could be used to mask the truth. Nicole couldn't deny that she loved Carlton in a very real way, but she also couldn't deny that there were moments when she wondered if she was truly in love with him, or with the feeling of being in the midst of chaos and having someone affirm that she was worthy, that she was still attractive, that her life hadn't ended in the old cracks. She didn't want to be the woman who chose chaos simply because she was familiar with it, but she also didn't want to be the woman who hid in safety just because she feared pain. And in the midst of those thoughts was Ted, the shadow of the past, the man who had once been Carlton's best friend, the center of a betrayal that Fairmont Crest couldn't stop judging. Even though they were always quick to judge anything, Carlton appeared in Nicole's life as a challenge, not only to the public at Fairmont Crest, but also to the very principles Nicole had built to save herself from the past. He had the charisma of a man who knew how to tell his story in a way that made listeners believe he had changed, that he had paid the price, that he deserved a fresh start. He brought vibrancy, promises of a future where he dared to take risks, dared to love, dared to break the rigid rules of the upper-class community. But it was Ted's past betrayal that cast a dark shadow over all of Carlton's promises. Nicole knew that people's judgments could be irrational, but she also knew that some judgments existed not out of malice, but because they struck a terrifying pattern of behavior. If Carlton had pursued Ted's ex-wife after their divorce, was it an impulsive mistake, a slip-up due to timing and selfish instinct, or a sign of a habitual predatory behavior to assert his ego? Nicole tried to convince herself that people can change, that one mistake doesn't define a lifetime, but the more she looked at how Carlton handled his past, the less sure she was that he regretted hurting Ted, or simply regretted being judged, being seen as a traitor. There was a thin but deadly difference between the two. Regret for causing pain was a sign of the capacity to love, while regret for being judged was a sign of the need for image control. Nicole feared that what Carlton protected most wasn't her, but the version of himself he wanted Fairmont Crest to see. And if he could betray his best friend, what would stop him from betraying Nicole in the future, when desire or self-interest took over? Meanwhile, Cale entered Nicole's world as a quiet counterpoint, not creating a storm, but making her feel at ease. Cale represented stability, respect, and the emotional security Nicole thought she would crave after her heartbreaks. With Cale, Nicole didn't have to guess what was hidden in his eyes, or wonder if his words were leading her astray from her intuition. Cale didn't need to show off, didn't need to turn affection into a performance. He gave her the feeling of being heard and seen as a person with depth, not a trophy or a captivating story to tell at a party. But that very sense of security unsettled Nicole in a different way, because she realized her heart hadn't been stirred as deeply by Cale as it had been by Carlton. That embarrassed her, because it revealed a truth many in Fairmont Crest were afraid to admit. Sometimes people are drawn to things that can hurt them, not because they enjoy pain. but because they are accustomed to fighting for love. Nicole wondered if her warning instinct stemmed from her own fear, from old wounds that made her constantly doubt any happiness, or from genuine signs of instability at Carlton. But then she had to confront the opposite question. If Cale offered respect and security, why couldn't she let go? Was it because being with Cale meant Nicole no longer living in a familiar drama, no longer feeling like she was winning an emotional battle? No longer feeling like she had to fight to hold onto someone? Or was it because being with Cale forced Nicole to become a more mature version of herself, a version that couldn't blame chaos when everything fell apart? Things began to crack and fall apart on what seemed like an ordinary evening when Fairmont Crest was bathed in social events and warm yellow lights, making it easy to mistakenly believe that life there was perfect. Nicole left a meeting in a state of confusion, wanting both to run to the Carlton for an embrace and to call Cale for a calm voice. As if she were standing between two doors and knew that stepping through either door would mean losing a part of herself. It was in that state of mind that intuition pulled her to a quiet hallway, where laughter and music had faded, leaving only sparse footsteps and the gentle breeze rustling through the windows. Nicole didn't intend to eavesdrop. She had once hated people who live by picking up other people's secrets. But there are moments when the body reacts before reason, like a survival instinct. Nicole stopped, not out of curiosity, but because something in the air sent a chill down her spine, as if a truth were staring her in the face, just waiting for her to turn around. Then Carlton's voice rang out, unlike the voice he used with her. Gone was the softness, the playful teasing, the deliberate charm. It was deeper, lower, more urgent, like someone trying to control a situation slipping out of their grasp. The first sentence Nicole heard was enough to paralyze her, for it wasn't a declaration of love, nor an apology, but a calculated, ambiguous statement. The kind that only makes sense when someone is hiding something important. Carlton said she didn't know, and the way he emphasized that word made it impossible for Nicole to identify who she was. It could be Nicole. It could be another woman. It could be an entire network of people being held in the shadows. And then a woman's voice responded, a voice weary yet proud, not like someone begging for love, but like someone demanding payment. The woman reiterated that he had promised, and that he shouldn't change his mind. What had Carlton promised? A reconciliation, money, silence? A secret agreement. Nicole couldn't hear it all. The pieces she picked up fell together haphazardly, yet formed a terrifying picture. Carlton had been married, a marriage he never mentioned. Even though their relationship had become so intimate that there was no room for awkwardness. And now his ex-wife appeared, not just to stir up jealousy, but like a door bursting open, exposing what Carlton had deliberately concealed. Exposing a history Nicole didn't know she was stepping into. That moment not only hurt Nicole because of the secrecy, but also terrified her for something deeper. If Carlton could hide an entire marriage, what else could he hide? Nicole was no longer simply choosing between two men. She was choosing between passion and trust, between burning desire and peace. Between a love that could transform her into the woman she feared most and a love that could transform her into the woman she always wanted to be. Nicole realized why the more intimate she became with Carlton, the more hesitant she felt, because that intimacy didn't make her feel safe, but rather trapped in a story whose beginning she didn't understand. She also realized that her warning instincts weren't just a legacy of the past, but the sensitivity of someone who had been deceived and learned that the sweetest words often conceal the sharpest truths. But then, amidst the chaos, Nicole had to confront the ugly side of herself. A part of her still wanted to run to Carlton to ask, to hear his explanation, to hope that it was all just a misunderstanding. It was the instinct of a lover, but also the instinct of a drama addict, someone accustomed to living in relationships where emotions surged like raging waves. Nicole didn't know how Cale would react if he knew she was caught up in this, but she knew Cale wouldn't demand blind faith from her. Cale will ask questions, demand clarity, and force Nicole to confront the truth. Therefore, siding with Cal means Nicole must accept a future without sweet storms, but also without secrets that could kill trust. In the following days, Fairmont Crest began to tremble with news about Carlton's ex-wife. People weren't just talking about his marriage, but also about why he kept it a secret. Some said he feared losing Nicole. Others said he feared the truth would destroy the image he had built. And still others said there were unresolved issues that made his ex-wife's return a knife to his future. Nicole stood in the eye of this storm, seen as a victim, pitied, even awaited for an explosive reaction to spice up someone else's party. But Nicole's pain wasn't for the audience. Her pain was private, creeping into every quiet moment when she was alone, wondering what signs she had missed, how she had convinced herself to believe such a beautiful story. She remembered the times Carlton dodged details of the past, the times he turned her questions into jokes, the times he used intimacy to make her forget what she intended to ask. And she realized it was a pattern, the way manipulated people make others feel bad for doubting, only for the deceived to apologize for asking the question. If Carlton truly regretted it, he would have spoken before it was exposed. If he truly wanted a clean future with Nicole, he wouldn't have let his ex-wife be the one to bring the truth in the cruelest way. Nicole finally understood that she was searching for love, but also for the version of herself she wanted to become. If she chose Carlton despite everything, she would be choosing a version of herself dragged back into a loop of passion and doubt. Choosing a future where every day she would question whether she was being betrayed. If she chose Kill, she would be choosing a version of herself who dared to respect herself, dared to love openly, but also had to accept that such love wouldn't always ignite her heart instantly. And then, just when Nicole thought she had seen enough to leave Carlton, one final piece of the puzzle truly froze her in place. From what she overheard, it wasn't his ex-wife who held the power, but rather Carlton, who seemed bound by some kind of promise. A promise that might involve someone else, a different truth, or an agreement that made things dirtier than she imagined. Nicole didn't know if she'd heard everything or only the most dangerous fragments, but she knew one thing: if she took the wrong step, the consequences wouldn't just be a broken heart, but an explosion that could spread throughout Fairmont Crest, taking Ted with her, taking Kill with her, and taking with her the honor and future Nicole was trying to reclaim for herself. And when she stood before the mirror that night, looking into her own eyes, Nicole realized the biggest question wasn't who she would choose, but what she would believe, truth or feeling. Self-respect or intoxication, peace or a life constantly chasing unspoken secrets.